Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
David Bowie and the search for life, death and God. It's a story of how Bowie's search for meaning inspired him to write the music that defined a generation. It is more than your average warts and all biography. It is written by Peter Ormerod, and I'm delighted to be joined by Peter. Now, Peter, good morning to you, and I hope I got your surname right.
You have. Fantastic. First time.
Now then, tell me a little bit about yourself and why you are so eminently qualified to write this particular tome.
Yeah, so the story of the book, in a way, it goes back to my childhood. My dad was a vicar, and sometimes that puts people off church for the rest of their lives. But for some reason, it sort of stayed with me. And I got into David Bowie in a massive way when I was 17 years old, back in 1996. Listening to Hunky Dory, that was my conversion experience.
Right.
And there were some lines on that just really seemed to shout out at me, lines about faith and these weird sort of references to mystical stuff, and I thought this is interesting. And then just over the years, I just wanted to read more, find out more, listen more, watch as many interviews with him as I could, and this religion stuff, this faith stuff, just spirituality stuff, it just kept coming up, and there was more and more of it. And so I thought, I'd love to read a book about this, and then I thought, maybe I should try to write it. So that's sort of how it came about.
Because people tend to think, the uninitiated into the Church of Bowie seem to think that basically he springs fully formed as Ziggy, circa 1971, 72, and then he is this sort of chameleon-like figure. But there is so much more to Bowie than that. When as the Americans would call it, the backstory. I mean, with his all the way from the Man Who Sold the Earth through to his studying with Lindsay Kemp in mime, through to his we're going back to being, if you like, a by the numbers pop star with his original sort of 1960s stuff in the mid 60s. But he starts off musically, and you could also say almost spiritually, as a choir boy, which mind officially blown there, Peter. The thought of Bowie as a choir boy,
Yeah, the choir boy stuff's really, really nice in its own way. I'm not sure how spiritually significant it was for him at the time. He was his parents sort of signed him up as a choir boy at his local church in Bromley back in the mid 1950s, and he stayed in there for about a year. And some people say, his heart wasn't really in it, and I can sort of see that. But what does happen is that throughout his life, throughout the rest of his career, there were elements of Christianity that keep popping up. And he seems pretty well informed about Christianity. He uses a lot of Christian imagery. And there's a bit of me that thinks, I wonder how much of that was informed by those early experiences as a choir boy.
Now, here's the thing: is he Church of England? Is he Church of Ziggy? Is he Church, or is he Catholic, Roman Catholic? I mean, I've never actually thought about that. What was officially, if you like, denominationally, what were his parents?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's an interesting one. So his mother and father used to have arguments about this a bit. So his mother came from a Catholic background, his father came from a Protestant background, and I think he just wanted to define himself slightly differently from that. He took offence in different ways at Catholicism and Protestantism, but he found, I think, his own, or a very interesting sort of mixture of ideas, which stem from, some of it does, stem from biblical Christianity, but some of it stems from what's known as Gnosticism as well, which is a whole load of ideas that were bubbling away before Christianity became what we think of it today. Became organised and sort of orthodox. So that's really, if there's one thing that he drew on rarely, it's sort of probably the Gnostic element was what fascinated him most.
And what's really interesting is, late 60s, everybody's, trepping off to India and, Afghanistan and Kashmir and that sort of thing, and doing getting their own guru, growing their hair long, getting a few beards, trying some interesting substances and expanding their consciousnesses, and then they come back in it. But that's very much that's very much a fashion trend. Bowie doesn't go down that whole. I mean, even though he appears in a dress on the Man Who Sold the World to Sold the World front album or single cover, whatever, he doesn't sort of subscribe to. You don't hear a lot of sitars in he's not demode like the Stones and the Beatles are being, and so maybe his look at spirituality you can say is put on hold for a couple of years until he goes through the Ziggy thing. Then he has goes to LA, has the massive crash in terms of Thin White Duke, etc. And then it's not until the Berlin trilogy and Heroes that he begins to, he goes to Berlin, he sees Turkey, he gets influenced by that sort of Eastern philosophy as well. Could you argue, Peter, that is perhaps what we can look at?
That's one way of looking at it, certainly.
Okay, that's a no, then.
But I think the spiritual stuff it flows through so much of his work. And he said that Space Oddity was a spiritual song. He said that was one of his first spiritual songs. We might not think of it as in that way at all. We might think of it as a song about an astronaut that gets stranded out in space. But he said it was a really spiritual song, and it's a song that obviously meant a lot to him. And so I go into that in a fair bit of detail in the book. And then you get songs that people might not know, a song like Holy Holy, for example, from the early 70s, which is very much informed by the weird magic of a guy called Aleister Crowley, who some of your listeners may...
The most wicked man and the worst wicked man on earth.
Wickedest man in the world.
Yes.
So, and as you say, there's a lot of biblical Christian sort of imagery, messianic imagery that crops up on Ziggy Stardust as well. So yeah, it's not like necessarily like Oriental sounds popping in. It isn't like sitars, like you say. It's stuff that infuses the lyrics, but does also sometimes come through in the music as well. A certain weirdness sometimes pervades it, and certainly by the time you get to Station, that's very, very much the case.
He does get influenced by Buddhism, especially like Tibetan Buddhism. Explain a little bit about how he comes across that and what you think the influences are on that one.
Yeah, so the Tibetan Buddhism stuff is really foundational to him. It was a mixture in terms of how he got into it, various ways. He loved the authors like Jack Kerouac, who was very into his Buddhism. Yeah. But he also got very, very interested in the plight of Tibet, and which was oppressed by China, and he became a great supporter of the Tibetan cause and the role of Buddhism as a force within that. And he also just the elements of Buddhism itself, the whole reinvention thing, the whole, it was the whole sort of sense of impermanence really appealed to him as well. So he was really taken by it in a whole load of ways, and it starts popping up. You hear it particularly. There's a song called "Silly Boy Blue" on his first album, which is his first time he really properly sort of goes into that in terms of his music, and then it pops up from time to time after that.
I'm just thinking about the last track on Diamond Dogs. What is the Chant of the Ever Circling? Yeah. What's it called? The
Family.
Yeah. Which is a difficult listen first time round, but the more you listen into it, it kind of builds as that chanting does in Buddhism.
Very good, very good point. Yeah, absolutely, and it flows through, and I think on a really fundamental level, it gave him the sort of permission, let's say, to explore different things, to go down different paths in his life, and not to stay still. Now,
one of the things is, if you've got spiritualism, you've got religion, it's all very well going when you've got a multi-million selling albums and the world is pinky and you're a big pink fluffy cloud and everything's going well. But, your true sort of spiritual anchor, if you like, is when you hit, as the saying goes, the rock bottom. And, 1975, 1976, Bowie is in a bad way. He is living in basic darkness in Los Angeles. He doesn't go out during the day, hence the whole thing with sound and vision, blue, in my room, etc. And Peter, you say he drew. This is what he could have gone. Your basic rock star's death, ODing in LA. But something pulls him back from the brink.
Yeah, it's a really troubling but fascinating, extraordinary, and scary story. He got very, very much enmeshed in sort of black magic stuff. And cocaine as well. One should not forget.
Never a good combination, that. Yeah.
No, indeed. And so, and it got to the point he was convinced that there were dark forces after him.
Didn't he have? Something just popped up. Didn't he have like Egyptian carvings of Egyptian guard dogs outside his Los Angeles house?
I think he did, yeah. But there was, but yeah, the scariest incident for him came when he thought that he saw Satan emerging from his swimming pool in LA, right. And he had his. Sorry, I know, yeah. And he had his swimming pool exercised. But and that sounds sort of funny, and there's something very sort of archetypal rock star about it. But it's also very almost Spinal Tap-ish, really. But it was really obviously terrifying experience for him, and it's something that Angie, his then wife, wrote about very, very clearly, and not in a, she said this actually happened, and there was and the water was thrashing around, and all sorts of weird stuff was happening, and a really sort of satanic mark was left at the bottom of the pool, and David, talked about that. Decades later, I don't think there's much doubt in his mind that happened. So he got, but what was also really important to him, there was a writer called Dion Fortune, who was an absolutely fascinating woman. He was a sort of into what you might call white magic, and she was very much opposed to the forces of what we might call black magic. And there were certain rituals that he followed through that. There was a sort of Christian undertone, certainly Christian undertone to her work, and there's a song on his on Station to Station called "Word on a Wing," where he gets very, very overtly Christian, and he starts. It's almost like a hymn. It's an extraordinary song. And that was that, yeah, as a sort of plea for salvation. So that was. That's one way of looking about how he escaped all of that and got out of all that and was, able to find the light, find the way forward.
Because Station to Station is a really interesting album because it's got that bridge. Because before that we have this, he does this Soul Train appearance and he's off his nut on Soul Train and he gets widely criticised and he's the first white guy to sort of do a Soul Train thing. And they say, listen, there are millions of people out there who want to be on this program. Sort yourself out. And so it's all that sort of tongue in cheek, young Americans and all that. And Station to Station is very much an album that marks a turning point because it's then that bridge in it that goes onto the Berlin trilogy, and that marks and Heroes, and that has a profound effect on him. And he's now got sober, and he's dried out, etc. And he's brought Iggy Pop along with him for the ride as well. So it really is. Station to Station is people will know Sound and Vision off that album, but then that's kind of it. And there's so much more in that is the genesis for a rebirth, if you like.
Absolutely. It's as if he needed to go through that to come out the other side, if that makes sense. So after Station to Station, after leaving LA, he first spends a little bit of time in Paris, but then goes to Berlin, and that's where he really reestablishes himself, finds himself in a new sort of way. Like you say, moves in with Iggy Pop in a flat, and records these extraordinary albums, and they're almost like the rebound of everything that he'd been through. So I don't think you get those amazing albums, Low and Heroes and Lodger, without having been through that terrible stuff, which isn't meant to sort of romanticize it, isn't meant to say, I don't mean to say that, or to trivialize it, but I don't think you get a song like Heroes without all the terrible stuff that he'd been through before.
And one of the things about what makes him so interesting is he doesn't sort of shout about it from the rooftops, does he? I mean, Bowie was always introspective. He was always an artist who'd use music as his primary form of expression. But he was a painter. He wrote. he acted. I mean, those of us who've seen The Hunger, Merry Christmas, Still This, Lawrence. There's the Elephant Man performance on Broadway, of course, and without makeup. So he knows what he is doing as an artist, but he doesn't come out saying, as we see so many times now, people proclaiming their sobriety or their spirituality. It is just a facet that is very personal to him. He will talk about it if you ask him, but he won't go, yes, this is my new album and it's all about my recovery, for example.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, he was never that direct about anything, even politics, you might say. But it's often there in his work, and I find that approach personally a lot more appealing and interesting than when you get artists who are absolutely direct about what they think about stuff. But it does bubble through. The spirituality stuff absolutely bubbles through. You get his Lord's Prayer incident in 1992 at Wembley during the concert for Freddie. You remember that?
Yeah, of course.
During that concert held in memory of Freddie Mercury, during his set, he suddenly knelt down and started praying the Lord's Prayer. And then there's an album a few years later where he's just really singing about his doubts about God and his fears and the sense that the world's going bad. Where on earth's God in all of this? So it does. There are times when it comes through implicitly, and there are times when it's really explicit. Even right to the end, even on Black Star, there's the imagery surrounding it and the lyrics and some of the songs and some of the videos. There's this real callback to his really most fervent and explicit spiritual stuff, really.
I mean, I even bought Tin Machine 1 on cassette. That's how old I am, right? And there's opening track of that, Heaven's in Here, and Jesus, you said, came to you, said in the vision, is one of the lyrics in there, but it might have been something with the food that we ate down the pub, which is, but so he's still got those references in there. But then we come to now, again, the public didn't know about his final illness. We are totally unaware of this 10 years ago. And that's why it comes to such a shock when, his passing's announced. But then you look at the album, the last album, and you just go, ye gods, that is, everything that the first, the single from the album comes out and you think, okay, he's looking back in Berlin. I wonder why he's doing that. Is he going back to doing his back catalogue? What's going on here? And then his death is announced, and suddenly it all, massively clicks into place like a huge jigsaw puzzle. And those final videos, with the, which are searingly brutal in their honesty.
Absolutely. And they're pretty shocking in a way to watch, I think, now. Really startling. And they were even before we knew what was going on. There wasn't that long, to be honest, before the video for Lazarus, where he's lying in bed, what looks like a hospital bed with bandages on his face. That was pretty striking at the time, but now we know the full story, and we also know during that video, it was during that video shoot apparently that he found out that his cancer would be terminal. So it's laden with all of that, that heartbreaking, but also almost death-defying element as well. So and the imagery also with those videos. So with the video for Black Star, there's a huge amount of weird arcane ritual going on in it, and weird symbolism, and the video for Lazarus, there's also shots of him wearing these clothes that he was most famous for wearing in those weird mid 1970s times. Mm-hmm. So it looks like a direct sort of callback to those really spiritually troubled periods. So it was as if he was really wrapping everything up, bringing everything together for one last sort of spectacular explosion of creativity.
When you speak to Iman, his wife, who is from, beautiful, one of the most beautiful women on the world, from Somalia, etc., and she hasn't gone down that well-worn showbiz widow's path about, my years with David and all that sort of stuff. She keeps it very much to herself, and she is very stoic, you could say, maybe, about the relationship and the fact that he's no longer with us. But I mean, does her spirituality have? Do they balance each other in terms of their spirituality? Because despite what certain American politicians might think of Somalia as being a shithole, there is a huge. Christianity comes from the early Christianity comes from Ethiopia, etc., which is not a million miles away from Somalia, to put it mildly. So does her spirituality and his spirituality intertwine? Do they both feed off each other?
Really, really interesting. Yeah. So Bowie was always interested. First off, since at least the 1980s, very interested in the relationship between Christianity and Islam, and the relationship between Islam and the West, you might say, generally. And he did see his marriage as a sort of union of those two cultures very much. So it influenced. There was that strand to their relationship. Around the time of their wedding, he also got especially keen to talk about God as well. Some of those interviews around that time, he got married. They very deliberately got married in a church in Florence. They didn't just want to do a register office thing. They wanted to do it, as Bowie said, before God. And you also get things like on pretty much the day, I think, that Bowie died, Iman posted on Instagram, she said, the struggle is real, but so is God. So there's a lot of faith there, certainly, and it's so interesting how those how they're relatively, how their different beliefs, played against each other. Yeah,
intertwined. It was really interesting because on the day I was actually flying from Spain to the UK, so I was at 33,000 feet. And my news flash went on with the announcement, and it went round the cabin like boom, everybody was suddenly looking at their phone going, oh my God. And I remember looking out the window, looking to see if I could see anything going up, not falling to earth, but this, ascending upwards, thinking, is the Starman going to be going in the opposite direction? It's that sort of effect, isn't it?
It is. It's an extraordinary thing, and his death has had an extraordinary effect on you could say even on how he's remembered, and it's got to the point where he's almost deified himself. It's almost as if he's treated as some sort of godlike figure, which I don't think is great myself. I think it's really important to remember him really as a man, and I think Bowie as a man is more interesting than Bowie as a god. I think it's so important to remember his flaws as well as his greatness.
But nothing as bad as like John Lennon, who has been beatified. Saint John of Lennon. For all his flaws, out of which there were several. I mean, Bowie during the Ziggy phase, is a nightmare. I mean, the way that he treats his band, the Spiders from Mars, is. I've interviewed the drummer from there, and he was like, one day we were top of the world, the next day we were on the scrap pile. That was it. And Mick Ronson, his guitarist, I mean, he treats them appallingly, and it takes them literally decades to, and it's only before Ronson's death that they sort of make finally, apologize. He apologizes to him.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so important to remember these things about all of our, these people who we, in some cases quite rightly regard as our heroes or whatever. They are human beings, and in some ways, pretty bad human beings in some respects. I think it seems to me that by the time he met Iman, he was on a rather more virtuous sort of path, and was much more sorted and together. But yeah, he wasn't always great, and his music wasn't always great. And I think it's really important to remember that as well. It wasn't always effortless brilliance and genius. There was a lot of work involved. There was a lot of there were some years and years went by before without releasing really great stuff. So yeah, and I think it's so vital to remember that, really.
What are you hoping that people will learn from, because it's not another Bowie book. This is a different take, and it's a much needed take. Like you said, there hadn't been one written on, and you think about it, it does. He was an artist. He wasn't a pop star. He was a bona fide artist. So what are you hoping that people will take or discover in your book?
Yeah, I hope to an extent. I hope that people listen to the songs in a new way. There can be some of these songs can get a bit overplayed and their power can diminish over time. But one of the experiences that I had writing the book
and rereading it, obviously,
and reading it as well, was that the songs sort of found a renewed sort of power for me. They rarely hit me harder and harder, and to the point where I can't really listen to Heroes now. If it comes on the radio, I need to turn it off. I can't, because it's so overwhelming to me. And I just hope that it'd be nice. And I've heard people who have read my book have, they've listened to old songs with sort of new ears in that way. And so I hope it reshapes him a bit, reshapes how people think of him, informs what people think of him. And I hope it sort of corrects a bit of a misapprehension about him. There's this idea you often hear, he was the chameleon of rock and he was all about, the cha-cha-cha changes and all that sort of stuff. And actually there was so much continuity throughout it all. And the spiritual stuff is such a vivid, fascinating strand that I think runs through everything he did.
The book is called David Bowie and the Search for Life, Death and God. It's by Peter Ormerod, who is speaking to today. Peter, if people want to follow you online, say good things to you on social media, where's the best place to find you?
As long as they only say good things
Indeed.
to me. They can find me, so I'm on X, formerly Twitter, as Ents Peter, which relates to my day job, ENTSPETER, but hopefully you can find me just by searching for my name. I'm on Blue Sky as well, it's Bowie God. You'll find me on there, and I'm on Instagram as well, so I'm there, and Substack as well, so I've this whole project started out on Substack as it happened. So you can look me up there, and
you can order the book as well via our own virtual bookstore. Go and find the virtual bookstore on TRE.radio. Click on the front cover and it'll be winging its way to you. The book is called David Bowie and the Search for Life, Death and God. It's by Peter Ormerod. Peter, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.